Okay, so get ready for a deep dive that'll really get you thinking.
Yeah.
We've got a conversation here between an anonymous user and ChatGPT. And let me tell you, it's not your typical chatbot chit-chat.
No, not at all. They're tackling some seriously big questions. It's like philosophy on steroids.
Exactly. We're talking about time, this, even death. What's really cool is that this user is actually trying to write a book based on these insights.
Yeah, and they're using ChatGPT as like a sounding board, a way to refine their message. It's kind of like we're peeking over their shoulder as they go through this incredible process of awakening.
I love that. A philosophical wrestling match, and we've got front row seats.
And they don't waste any time getting to the heavy stuff. Right off the bat, they're questioning the nature of reality itself.
Like right from the start, they're diving into the deep end. They talk about time, how it's not this fixed thing, but something we experience subjectively.
And they even challenge the idea of the speed of light being constant, bringing in quantum mechanics and how observation can actually influence reality.
Whoa, hold on. So they're saying that our consciousness, like our awareness, actually plays a role in shaping what we perceive as real.
That's what it sounds like. It's like they're saying we're not just passive observers, we're active participants in creating our reality.
Okay, now my brain is officially starting to melt.
Yeah.
But I'm hooked. Keep going.
So they go on to suggest that if someone could completely eliminate the separation between themselves and what they're observing, they would basically exist outside of time.
Outside of time, like they'd be timeless.
Yeah, that's the idea. And this whole concept of non-separation is crucial to their argument. They believe that if we can break down the duality between our thoughts and actions, we might tap into this universal consciousness where everything is interconnected.
Okay, so how does all of this tie into the book they're writing?
Well, their book is called Body Over Mind, Action Over Motivation, and it seems to be a direct application of all these mind-bending insights.
So instead of like the typical self-help stuff about willpower and positive thinking, they're advocating for a more embodied approach.
Exactly. They're saying that action should come from a place of presence, not mental effort. Like, we need to get out of our heads and into our bodies.
It's like they're suggesting that our bodies have an innate wisdom that we've lost touch with because we're so caught up in our thoughts.
Right, exactly. And they talk about things like meditation, exercise, and mindful eating as ways to reconnect with that wisdom and break free from the ego's control.
Makes sense. But there's this inherent paradox, right? They're trying to communicate something that's beyond language.
Yeah, they actually talk about that. They say, words, being time-bound and limited, seem to have trouble communicating the energy of what they're trying to convey.
That's fascinating because it points to the limitations of trying to capture a direct experience with words. It's like these insights can't be fully grasped intellectually. They have to be embodied and lived.
Absolutely. And this struggle with language really highlights the unique challenge they face. They're trying to share something that can't really be taught. It has to be experienced.
So how do they propose to do that? If words aren't enough, how do you share this kind of profound insight?
Well, they're exploring some pretty unconventional approaches. They talk about nonverbal gatherings and art that defies interpretation. Like they're trying to create experiences that disrupt our habitual ways of thinking.
It's like they're trying to open a door to a completely different way of perceiving reality, one that goes beyond the limitations of our minds.
And a big part of that seems to be dismantling the ego, what they call the self. They see it as a construct that keeps us trapped in suffering.
So they're saying that the self, the ego, is actually an illusion.
That's what they're suggesting. They describe it as a collection of memories, beliefs, and attachments, all those things that make up our sense of I.
So all that stuff that we think defines us is actually just a bunch of mental baggage.
Pretty much. And they argue that the energy we waste maintaining this illusion of self could be used for something much more profound.
Okay, I'm starting to see where they're going with this, but it sounds like a pretty radical shift in perspective.
It is. But they're not saying that we need to achieve some higher state of consciousness or cultivate a new identity. They're saying that we already are whole, already connected to everything, and we just need to let go of the illusion of separation.
It's like they're saying that enlightenment, or this state of non-separation, isn't something you achieve, it's something you realize.
Exactly. And they make a really important point about how it can't be cultivated through effort. It has to happen instantly, like a flash of insight that shatters the illusion of the ego.
Wow, that's a pretty mind-blowing concept. So any attempt to grasp or control this state of being would just be another trick of the ego.
Right. They even express concern that some spiritual movements might have failed because they tried to systematize this awareness, turning it into something to be achieved, which ultimately reinforces the ego's sense of separateness.
So they're facing a real dilemma, right? How to communicate something that can't be taught,
Right.
something that has to be directly experienced.
They're even thinking about publishing their conversation with ChatGPT as a kind of anti-book, something that disrupts the reader's habitual patterns of thought, rather than providing more concepts to cling to.
That's a bold move. It shows how committed they are to finding new ways to share this profound insight.
And that commitment really comes through in the way they delve into their book, Body Over Mind, Action Over Motivation. It's like a practical guide to embodying this state of presence.
So it's about putting the body's needs before the mind's desires and acting from a place of intuition rather than overthinking.
Exactly. They seem to be saying that action itself, when it arises from a place of presence, can be a pathway to dissolving the ego and experiencing this interconnectedness they're describing.
Okay, so let's get into the specifics of what they're proposing. Their book starts with a chapter on meditation. What's their take on this ancient practice?
Well, they've got this unique approach to meditation. You see, the first chapter is called Meditation and Diving into Thought, and they straight up reject any kind of structured or like pre-planned meditation technique.
So less about emptying your mind and more about really paying attention to what's going on in there.
Exactly. They encourage readers to just observe their thoughts without judging them, to become aware of that constant chatter and see how much energy we waste getting caught up in it.
They describe how most of our thoughts are reactive, stemming from previous thoughts, and that these reactive patterns create what we call our state of mind. Whether we're feeling positive, negative, lazy, or chaotic, it's all driven by these habitual thought loops.
And they point out how these states of mind are constantly changing, like waves, influenced by external events and our own ingrained patterns of thinking.
Like we're rarely fully present in the moment, always somewhere else in our minds.
Right. They highlight how from the moment we wake up, our minds are often fixated on the past and the future, rehashing old stories or worrying about what's to come.
And they link this mental activity to the ego, saying that when our thoughts are filtered through the ego, they create a mood that can leave us feeling drained and depleted.
Yeah, they define the ego as everything that makes up the psychological I. Our beliefs, prejudices, identities, limitations, attachments, insecurities, and ideals. It's all the baggage we carry around that shapes how we see ourselves and the world.
Sounds exhausting.
It is. They argue that because the ego is constantly filtering our experiences through this lens of the past, it's incredibly energy intensive. It takes a lot of mental effort to maintain those egotistical thoughts and reactions.
So the more attached we are to our ego, the more exhausted we feel. Makes sense. But they also observe that there are times when the ego seems to disappear, like in moments of severe urgency or awe.
Yes. They give the example of waking up late for work. In that moment of urgency, the body naturally springs into action, bypassing the ego's need to analyze and deliberate. The body just knows what needs to be done and does it.
So in those moments, we're not caught up in our heads. We're just responding to the situation at hand.
Exactly. And they contrast this with what happens when we allow the ego to enter the picture. We start feeling stressed, anxious, or like a failure because we're not meeting our own expectations.
It's like the ego is judging our every move, creating unnecessary suffering on top of an already stressful situation.
They argue that this same dynamic plays out in moments of awe, like when we're captivated by the beauty of nature. We might initially feel a sense of oneness, but then the ego kicks in, starts labeling and categorizing, and pulls us out of that state of presence.
It's like the ego can't stand to just be present and experience things as they are. It always has to add its own commentary and interpretation.
Right, and they even use the example of falling in love. Initially, there's a sense of awe and wonder, but as the ego starts creating images and expectations, that feeling fades. And it becomes more about our own projections than about the other person.
So how do they propose we cultivate this kind of presence? They talk about meditation being the key, but they're not talking about traditional meditation techniques.
Right. Their approach to meditation is about seeing these wastages of energy and reacting to life. They believe that meditation allows us to see our thoughts clearly without getting caught up in their stories or believing them to be true.
So it's about recognizing them as simply mental events, not as reflections of who we are.
Exactly. And they make a really important point about the ego's tendency to agree or disagree with what we're reading or hearing. They caution against getting caught up in that mental back and forth because it's just another way for the ego to assert itself.
It's like the ego wants to maintain its sense of control, even in the process of trying to let go.
Precisely. And they emphasize that this awareness must be put into action. It's not enough to just think about these ideas. We have to embody them in our lives.
Okay, so how do they suggest we do that? How do we bring this awareness into our everyday lives?
They recommend taking action immediately upon waking up, before the ego has a chance to hijack our day with its worries and plans. They suggest starting with something simple that requires minimal thought, like doing a few push-ups, squats, or stretches.
It's about getting the body moving before the mind has a chance to take over.
Exactly. They argue that this helps create a more positive momentum for the day, making it easier to make healthy choices and stay present.
They also emphasize that meditation is not a one-time event, but something we practice throughout the day, especially when interacting with the world.
It's about noticing the ego's reactions in real time without feeling obligated to engage with them.
So it's about staying grounded in the present moment, even amid the chaos of daily life. I like that.
They also highlight how the mind often puts its own needs before the body's needs, even though the mind is part of the body.
It's like we've created this artificial separation between the two when in reality they're inseparable.
Right. And they emphasize that taking care of the body inevitably takes care of the mind. When we nourish the body with movement, healthy food, and rest, the mind naturally becomes clearer and more peaceful.
It sounds like a very holistic approach to well-being, recognizing the interconnectedness of body and mind. And this idea of recognizing the ego's attempts to hijack even our best intentions really resonates with me.
Absolutely. They point out how even the thought, easier said than done, is the ego filtering what we're reading and creating doubt. It's about recognizing those subtle ways the ego tries to maintain its grip.
That's a really valuable insight. It's so easy to get caught up in those mental traps without even realizing it.
And they remind us that this realization comes effortlessly when there's no separation between the mediator and the meditation, when we're simply present with what is without judgment or resistance.
This is such a rich and insightful exploration of meditation and the nature of thought. But how does all of this relate to exercise? They dedicate a whole chapter to that, right?
They do. It's called Exercising the Body Will Produce a Better Functioning Mind. And they go beyond like the typical stuff about physical benefits.
Okay.
They really dive into the mental and emotional barriers we put up around exercise.
Oh, yeah, totally. They list out all the classic excuses, right? Like no time, too tired, comparing ourselves to others, no motivation. It's like they're reading my diary.
It's so relatable, right? And they call us out on those excuses. They say it's all just a way of making ourselves feel better mentally while we're neglecting our physical needs.
Like trying to convince ourselves it's okay to prioritize mental comfort over physical well-being.
Yeah, exactly. Like we're trying to outsmart our bodies.
Yeah.
But in the end, they always catch up with us.
So true. And they really challenge us to like observe those thoughts and feelings around exercise,
Yeah.
To see how they're preventing us from doing what we know is good for us.
They suggest that the more we neglect exercise, the more we hurt ourselves, both physically and mentally. Like it's this downward spiral.
And they don't sugarcoat it either. They're like, stop making excuses and take responsibility for your physical health.
Right. No more messing around.
It's kind of like showering. We don't make excuses to avoid showering, right? It's just something we do because we understand the benefits.
That's such a good analogy. They suggest that exercise can become just as habitual if we shift our mindset, like reframe it as self-care instead of a chore.
I can definitely see how that would make a difference.
Yeah.
But they also acknowledge that it's not always easy, especially if we haven't been prioritizing our physical health.
Yeah, for sure. They encourage us to stay present with the discomfort, to feel the suffering that comes from that neglect without trying to escape it.
That sounds tough, but it sounds like they're suggesting that this suffering can actually be a catalyst for transformation.
Exactly. They argue that if we can sit with that pain of realizing how we've been mistreating our bodies, it can lead to a profound shift in perspective.
So it's about facing the truth of our situation and then choosing to do better.
Yes, taking responsibility without judgment. And they point out that once we see that truth, we can also start to appreciate the incredible beauty and resilience of our bodies.
It's like falling in love with our bodies all over again.
Right. And once we experience that appreciation, exercise becomes a natural expression of that love.
Yeah.
It's no longer about trying to achieve some external ideal, but about taking care of something precious.
I love that. They even encourage us to invest in our physical health with the same care and attention we would give to a valuable possession. It's a powerful way to look at it.
Totally. And they acknowledge that if we've been neglecting our bodies for a long time, we might need professional help to get back on track.
Which is totally okay. There's no shame in asking for help.
None at all. And once we've made that decision to start exercising, they remind us to bring that same sense of presence and awareness to our workouts.
So it's not just about going through the motions. It's about being fully present in our bodies, noticing our breath, our movements, and any sensations that come up.
Exactly. They encourage us to let go of any distracting thoughts, whether it's worries about the past, plans for the future, or even comparisons to others.
It's about bringing our full attention to the experience of moving our bodies.
And they even suggest that exercise can be a form of meditation in itself, a way to cultivate a deeper mind-body connection.
So it's not just about physical fitness. It's about mental and emotional well-being as well. It's all interconnected.
Absolutely. And they make this interesting point about how our mental state during exercise can actually affect our overall experience. They say that when we're feeling good, it's easier to tell which thoughts are helpful and which ones aren't.
So if we're noticing negative or self-critical thoughts during our workout, we can use that awareness to shift our focus back to the present moment.
Right. And by paying attention to our thoughts, we can start to identify the things that trigger them. Once we know what those triggers are, we can either avoid them or develop strategies to deal with them.
It's all about becoming more aware of our own mental patterns and how they affect our behavior. Self-awareness seems to be like a major theme throughout this whole conversation.
You got it. And they emphasize that the goal of exercising the body is to help it function at its best in everyday life.
So it's not about looking good or achieving some arbitrary fitness goal. It's about improving our overall quality of life.
Exactly. And they encourage us to carry the good habits we develop in the gym into the rest of our lives. Like, if we improve our posture during our workouts, we can make a conscious effort to maintain that good posture throughout the day.
It's about integrating these practices into our daily routines, making them a natural part of who we are.
And they point out that this takes consistent effort and attention. It's not about achieving perfection overnight, but about making gradual progress over time.
It's about celebrating the small victories and recognizing that every step in the right direction is a win.
Absolutely. And they remind us to be patient with ourselves, especially if we've been neglecting our bodies for a long time. It takes time to break old habits and create new ones.
It's a journey, not a destination. And they encourage us to seek professional help if we're struggling to make progress on our own.
It takes courage to admit that we need help, and it's a sign of strength to reach out for it.
Speaking of things that can be tough to admit, they also bring up the role of money in self-care.
It's easy to prioritize other expenses over our own well-being, right? Especially if we're not used to investing in ourselves.
They challenge us to examine our spending habits and ask ourselves if our bodies are worthy investment. It's a good question to ask, isn't it?
Definitely makes you think. They remind us that our bodies are our most valuable assets, and we should be prioritizing them accordingly.
It's about shifting our values and recognizing that our health and well-being are priceless.
Absolutely. And they encourage us to act on that realization, to take the steps necessary to honor our bodies and live our lives to the fullest.
This chapter is packed with so much wisdom and practical advice. It's like a powerful reminder that taking care of our bodies isn't just about physical fitness. It's about cultivating a deeper connection to ourselves and to the present moment. It really sets the stage for the next chapter, which explores the concept of mutual serious accountability and how connecting with others can amplify our efforts.
Yeah, they make a really interesting argument for finding a partner who's equally committed to growth and transformation. They suggest that when two people's energies are aligned toward the common goal, the combined energy is like greater than the sum of its parts.
So it's not just about finding a workout buddy, it's about finding someone who's on a similar path. Someone who can challenge us and support us in our growth.
Exactly. And they caution against choosing a partner whose seriousness outweighs our own, because that can lead to feelings of inadequacy or resentment.
It's all about finding that balance, right? Where both people feel empowered and inspired by the partnership.
Right on. And they emphasize that the most powerful partnerships are those where both individuals are equally serious and committed, where they can really push each other to new heights and inspire each other's creativity.
That's such a beautiful vision of what's possible when two people come together with a shared purpose and mutual support. But they also acknowledge that finding this kind of partnership can be challenging, especially in a world where most people are still operating from a place of ego and separation.
They point out that the more we've interacted with someone, the more likely we are to have formed images and expectations of them, which can really cloud our perception and make it harder to connect on a deeper level.
Like those preconceived notions can get in the way of truly seeing someone for who they are.
Exactly. And they caution against trying to explain these ideas to our partner, like in an attempt to get them to see things our way. They remind us that we can't force enlightenment on anyone. It has to come from within.
It's about respecting each other's journey, even if it looks different from our own.
So true. They suggest that we focus on meeting our partner with unconditional love and acceptance, allowing them the space to come to their own realizations in their own time.
So it's about creating a space for growth and transformation, both for ourselves and for our partners.
Exactly. And they point out that when this kind of energetic alignment happens, it can have a ripple effect, not just on the two individuals, but on everyone they come into contact with.
Like a chain reaction of positive energy spreading outward, creating a more harmonious and interconnected world. That's a beautiful thought.
It is. And they bring up this interesting point about proof. They say that people who are operating from ego will always demand material proof, but those who have transcended the ego will be able to see the immaterial proofs, you know? The subtle shifts in energy and awareness that happen when two people come together in true unity.
It's like they're saying that the most profound truths are beyond measurement. They can only be experienced directly.
And they wrap up this section with a powerful reminder that taking care of our bodies isn't just about physical health. It's about contributing to the well-being of the whole world. They suggest that when we're free from those ego distractions, we can see more clearly what really matters and use our energy to make a positive impact.
Which brings us to their final chapter on nutrition. It's called Knowing You Should Be Eating Better, but Choosing Not to. They really don't hold back, do they?
Nope, they get straight to the point. They address all those excuses we use to justify our unhealthy eating habits. You know, like most of us know we could be eating better, but we prioritize convenience, taste, or whatever over actual nourishment.
It sounds like another example of the mind or the ego calling the shots, even when it's not in our best interest.
Right. And they really urge us to feel the truth of that in our bodies, not just understand it intellectually. They argue that by actually facing the discomfort of our unhealthy choices, we can break free from those patterns and create space for new, healthier habits.
They make it clear that it's not enough to just agree with them or even intend to eat better. We have to actually change our behavior.
Absolutely. And they caution against the sneaky ways the ego can trick us into thinking we're making progress when we're not, you know?
It's like the ego can even hijack the idea of self-improvement just to stay in control.
Exactly. So they encourage us to be vigilant, to watch out for those mental traps, and to love ourselves enough to make choices that truly nourish our bodies, even when it's hard.
They say that if we truly valued our bodies as much as we value our possessions, we'd be a lot more careful about what we put into them.
That's such a powerful analogy, right? It highlights how disconnected we can be from our own values. They remind us that our bodies are our most precious possessions, and we should treat them that way.
This final chapter really brings the book full circle, doesn't it? It ties together all those themes of self-awareness, presence, and action. It's like a call to step out of the ego's grip and into the fullness of our being, to honor our bodies and make choices that support our well-being.
It's amazing to think that this whole conversation started with a simple question about the speed of light. The user's willingness to question everything and explore unconventional ideas led them on this profound journey of self-discovery.
It shows the power of curiosity and the transformative potential that we all have inside of us. If we're open to questioning our beliefs and exploring new perspectives, who knows what we might find.
And imagine the ripple effect if these insights spread even further. If we use the idea of 6 degrees of separation, and this user's ideas impact just 5 people directly, and those people each impact 5 more, and so on, the potential reach is huge. We're talking about over 3,000 people touched by these ideas in just a few steps.
Wow, that's incredible. It suggests that even the smallest acts of awareness and compassion can have a massive impact on the world.
So what does this all mean for you? What if you started approaching your life with a little less ego and a little more presence? What kind of transformations might you experience? What kind of ripples might you create?
Those are some seriously thought-provoking questions. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time.